I'm Steve, and I want to thank you so much for engaging with this conversation. Today I talk with Stefan, Bart, and O'Shea, and they are quality people who love Jesus, and we are called to love one another. We're called to be in right relationship with each other, and in order to have a real relationship, you need to have real dialogue. So today we ask some questions, some of the hard ones that aren't necessarily being addressed in the media or anywhere else, because it's awkward. But in order to deal with the awkward, we need to acknowledge the awkward. So that's kind of what we're doing today. And here's the thing, I want to encourage you to assume not only the best of those guys, but also the best of me. That we're all trying to speak the truth in love, that we're trying to be sincere, trying to be genuine. And we don't need to necessarily agree on everything. Now, and that's the thing about having a relationship. You don't always agree with each other on everything, but we do need to listen to understand each other. So I hope today's conversation is enlightening to you, and I hope it's helpful to you.
There we go. Recording. All right. Beautiful. Well, everybody, thank you so much thanks guys for joining. And I really do appreciate you guys doing this, having this conversation with me. And I hope this is engaging and enlightening for those who listen or however we partake. But anyway, I'm going to start us off with just some scripture, and then I'll kind of continue. So Philippians chapter 2, starting with verse 3, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out for only your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not consider equality with God as something to be grasped. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God. He died a criminal's death on a cross. Therefore, God elevated him to the highest place of honor and gave him the name above all other names, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue declare that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So, that being said, we are, as Christians, because we all love Jesus, we are called to love God with everything that we are, right? All of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind, all of our strength. So nothing is left over. And then we are called to love our neighbors as ourselves, which we know that we're already loving ourselves to the point that we're loving God with everything we are. So we're trying to love our neighbors to God. And as we've been discussing in the 10 Commandments, one of the things about the second command, which is you shall have no idols, is the reason why is because human beings were made in the image of God. And so we are to be the signposts, the direction pointers to God. So when we see each other, it's actually supposed to cause us to praise and glorify God, which is why it's a slap in the face to God when we create other things and we put other things in the place of God. So that being said, again, I'm grateful for you guys. And why don't we start with you, O'Shea? You can kind of give us a quick snapshot, maybe 1 to 2 minutes of who you are and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like you said, my name is O'Shea. I'm actually currently a youth pastor at One Church TO. A little bit about personal life. I am married with 0 kids, not yet. I am married to my lovely wife who is Filipino, and myself, I am half Jamaican and half a cocktail of European countries. And my dad basically grew up in Jamaica and immigrated over here and produced me.
Beautiful. Bart, why don't you give us your info?
Yeah, the last, I'd say, 15 years I've been involved in ministry. Last 10 years specifically employed vocationally, doing marketing communications in a small church context and large church context. I'm Haitian. I'm in a blended family. My wife is Dutch and British, and I have 2 kids, 1 6, 1 4, Victory and Dylan, and that's kind of my spiel.
Beautiful. And Stefan.
Yeah, I presently am a youth pastor in Stouffville, Ontario, which is about 35 minutes north of Toronto. My wife and I, we've been married for almost 8 years in August, 7 years right now. And 6 weeks ago, we welcomed our daughter, Aaliyah Joy. My wife.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's been a lot of sleepless nights so far. On my wife's part, I get sleep. I'm just
Wow.
my wife. Listen, you gotta admit the truth. You gotta tell the truth. I'm trying to push Bart to have another one. My wife is Guyanese, Portuguese, and Swiss mix. My parents are from Guyana and Jamaica, and so my wife is white, pretty much. She looks white, but she's got that mixture in her, that background, sort of like a cocktail, like O'Shea said. And then I'm Guyanese, Jamaican heritage, born here.
Beautiful. I'm half Scottish, so my parents came from Scotland. Well, my grandparents came from Scotland and then brought everyone over, and the rest is just the English-French cocktail. And so anyway, here we are. And I really do appreciate you guys. You guys are a part of the House of Common show. And so we'll make sure to link towards that so other people can kind of see your content as well. So you guys are trying to add value not only to the kingdom of God, but also to the world at large. I believe anyway, by having honest and good conversations, not only about race, but whether songs are actually worship songs or not. And that's a good thing. And so that being said, one of you give me your definition of racism and prejudice. Bart, you raise your hand.
Yeah, definitely. This is just because I've been answering this question so frequently. You know, people often answer, "Well, I'm not racist." You know, why is all this race conversation happening, and where are they coming from? And I try to explain it in a sense of people assume racism is only a specific act. And I try to explain to say think of racism in the sense of a system. And the things that we actually call racism would be maybe prejudices or discrimination. But racism that we see more prevalently in North America, Canada, and in the US, more specifically, is talking about the system. And that system is operating as intended, and that's why we have this clash. You have Europeans who colonized America, North America, and they, brutally stole the land from First Nation people, and then bought, depending who you talk to, Africans from Africa to build this country. So before the forefathers, like in America, and before the forefathers in Canada, there was no idea of a life where slaves would be free, where North America would be a safe haven. So you have to understand racism is the idea or the construct that the society that we lived in right now was not intended for everyone to be as equal. And that's kind of like, if you think of it that way, racism is like how things perpetuate a negative connotation, versus racism is, well, what you say behind someone's back, when they're not in the room, or the look you give when they walk by, or when you're upset, you make a generalization. That's discrimination. That's prejudice. Racism is more a bigger idea.
And can you, and I've seen a lot of different definitions going around. So can we talk about the idea of what's privilege?
I can go again. Trust me, I got lots.
All right, let's do it.
Go for it, Bart.
Go for it, Bart. Go for it, Bart. I feel like you would encapsulate it the best way.
Yes.
The way that I tell a lot of people about privilege, let's say, Steve, you and I were having a race, but it's in your hometown. You get to go before I get to go. And when the official allows me to run, He also holds on to the back of my shirt the entire time I'm running. And the privilege is actually everybody in the stands. Everybody in the stands who's watching, not understanding why isn't Bart performing as well as Steve. Steve is running, he's doing his thing, he's going, but Bart, why are you not running as fast? And how come you're so behind? And why are you so late? All of these things, that idea, that is privilege. Privilege is the notion that people have been disadvantaged by racism, the system, not the acts, the system, but yet the perception is, why are you not behaving as such when there has been such a lead advantage?
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else want to add to either one of those?
I mean, I think he hit it right on the nail, right? When you look at just looking at privilege, I think the example that he gave is spot on. And I think you can even dive into it a little bit more and understand that when we talk about privilege and stuff like that, the reality is everybody has some sort of privilege in the context that they're in. And understanding that is understanding that we all have a right or an immunity that's granted to us to benefit us in a certain way or give us a certain advantage or a favor in any activity, any social setting that we're in, any conversations that we have.
Stefan, you got anything? Or are you good?
No, those guys hit it right on the head.
Okay.
I don't think I can do a better job than what gave you there.
Okay, yeah, because like the my understanding from Chris is functionally very similar. Thinking of Chris Chase, in that at least the way I understood it, it's cultural, it's contextual, right? So one of the conversations I'm having with another guy is, or that I had with someone else, was he was talking about how his brother, who is Filipino, is at university, and he's finding he just kind of broke down the one day, and his brother admitted that just in his feelings, it'd be a lot easier if I was white. And so again, and that's based on his college situation and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's so many different things going on. One thing I didn't actually ask, but I think it would be kind of helpful for you guys to explain as well, is what's your definition of systemic racism? How does that actually maybe play out a little bit?
Yeah, the idea of systemic racism.
Mm-hmm. And how does it play out?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of good videos in terms of like that talk about it, and I can generalize a little bit, but the notion that I'm trying to figure out how far back should I go. So even in Canada, I know, because the thing is that it's so far back rooted. So let's say in North America, you understand the concept of redlining. It happens in Canada, it happens in America. It's more prevalent in America, where people after slavery was abolished did not necessarily want to integrate. And so they tried to force people to live in certain communities unto their own. They were often in a less desirable area of the town, of the city. And because there was less opportunity there was more crime there. More crime there then means that there would be more heavily policed areas. So systemic, especially in America, because I know we're talking a lot about the things that have happened in America in this conversation. In America, you also have to understand, the culture of slavery was much later abolished versus the culture here in Canada. So systemic attributes would be education, judicial system, things that are continually perpetuating the idea that we don't have the same access to things that other people do. So if you're looking at somebody who, your friend who you mentioned, his Filipino, you think he's having a rough go at it. The difference between somebody who is a minority versus somebody who is white, who's getting better access to information, is paved with money. See, access to that information, good schools don't offer preparatory courses for higher level education. The poor neighborhoods don't have good financial institutions that offer people rates at a rates that are like prime, or what would be considered average or a good interest rate,
Right.
or they don't get a rate at all. They don't get the loan the same way that you would get a loan. Acceptance into colleges or into universities are then systemically. So again, it's not one thing, it's everything grinding against somebody. So by the time somebody is 30 years old, they've lived a much harder life than somebody who is white in a community who has maybe had a better opportunity. In a Black community, you get one chance. If you miss your SATs or your way to showcase that you are an intelligent student, chances are you're not going to get into Harvard. You're not going to get into Ivy League. You're going to get into some type of
Community college.
state college. Whereas if you are, and on top of that, you may not even get to that point if you're living with home issues, in the sense like single parent, drug abuse, high crime rate in your neighborhood, all these things. So the people that have the most need don't have the best resources, and the people that have the least amount of needs have all the resources. How many nice neighborhoods have preparatory schools, have after-school programs, have all these things that prepare them to be successful in life, whereas people who are systemically put in a place of poverty and have gang and drug issues have less school supplies, less curricular activities, and less opportunities to actually thrive in a system that wasn't made for them.
So just so I can understand and maybe rephrase it, one of the ways that you would suggest that systemic racism is around is not that anyone's necessarily actively perpetuating it currently. The thing is because of the cycles that it created, and that's what makes it systemic. Would you say that that's...
Yeah, kind of. I think it does still actively happen. Like in Canada, you and me have the exact same credit score, have the exact same job, have the exact same everything. Statistically, in Canada today, you get not only a larger loan, you get it at a better rate. That's fact. So that's where it's like even we have taught the computers, the algorithms are biases. So when they punch it in the bank and they say, okay, Steve's going to get this rate at this term for this long, and then they say, Bart, here, this is your rate, this is your term, this is this long, there is a discrepancy. And that has to be taught somewhere. An engineer or a sample size of data is being fed to that machine for it to relay that information back to us.
Okay, so if I can ask a question, a lot of that is, from what I understand, it's illegal. So how would someone get away with it if it's already illegal, right? Because and here's why I asked the question, right? So this is going to be like one of those little pushback things.
Yes.
So if it's illegal, and in our culture, I'm sure you could find a lineup of lawyers who would love to get in on that. Do you know what I mean? So what does, like, how does it continue? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just, because I'm trying to wrap my mind around it.
Mm-hmm. I think the best way you can look at it is so the way that Bart described systemic racism is, it's not necessarily like systemic racism has to do with a lot of the intangibles that we don't see, right? So when we look at a lot of that stuff, Bart was talking about healthcare, criminal justice, you're looking at political power. So one of the main reasons why we know it's illegal to hire someone based on their race or fire someone based on their race. But the problem with it, why it doesn't become as prevalent, it doesn't become as known, it's not maybe even talked about or even identified as much, is because the roots are there. So right. when you're looking at the systemic racism in a political power, they're the same ones that are making the laws, but when it comes to enforcing it, it's a little different, and it gets enforced maybe for a certain group of people, not just singling out, again, blacks and whites, but it can be for a certain group of people. It can be for a certain majority of people. And I think that's one of the big things on why it goes unnoticed, why it goes unpunished, is it's really tough to have something that's embedded and ingrained and a cycle, and then be like, oh yeah, we're now going to go fight against this thing that is embedded in our cycles that ultimately benefit us in the long run. So how much do we?
I would say like everything is tied to everything else.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's like if so, like I know specifically in America when you talk about redlining and finances, because the average default rate in redlined areas is high, then the interest rate is high. So irregardless of your personal finance, your zip code has now affected the rate that you get. So
Yes.
This is where it's like, well, I can't help the fact that I live here because that's all I can afford, and there's no social system that can help me get out of here. And I am trying to start a business, and I need, $50,000. And now you guys are saying I'm going to get like 13, 15%. And it's like, well, if you lived in a different area, but I can't live in a different area because I'm priced out of that area. So that's where it's like, well, that thing is connected to that thing, which is connected to that thing. It's all interconnected.
It is super interconnected. And one of the things that, Bart just mentioned it, but zip codes here, even here in Toronto, we know that there are certain areas where minorities are more likely to live. And I've been through the city of Toronto in different areas, and I know that in certain areas where there are more, I'll say, white people, the streets get cleaned a lot more. The roads are taken care of a little bit better. Then you'll go to certain other areas where you'll never see a street sweeper. You'll never see the grass cut. And so these things get taken into account, because when someone, again, punches in their postal code, it comes up and you say, oh, that area. Okay, I know that. And this is, again, this Bart talked about the biases that have been taught. These things pop up, and it becomes something that people have to fight against. If you live in a poorer area, chances are you're not going to be able to pay back a loan. That's this is what the system is going to look at. The computer is going to look at, or things like that. You're not going to be able to pay back a loan. So we're not going to give you a lot, but we also have to give you a higher interest rate because you're less likely to have a high credit score. Or you probably don't have a high credit score. These are things. And so that all, like these guys just said, it's all sort of tied in together, and I don't know where it started, but it has to end at some point in time, we hope.
No, for sure. And that's where I think that it is a hard discussion, because how do you end it? Right. And obviously that's, I don't know, right? if it's a self thing. Right. And that's the thing, right? And so again, as Christians, we get to look forward to when Jesus is just like, yeah, okay, and game over. We get to relax, right? So we look forward to that. And so just I think maybe even too, have you guys seen this kind of stuff in the church at large? So when I say it, I instead of just kind of giving anecdotal evidence, why don't we give, if you have specific instances that you've experienced, avoid names maybe, because that'll be awkward.
I don't work in a church, so I can answer more freely than these guys.
I feel like Bart's the person to answer that question.
Bart's definitely the person to answer.
Okay, Bart, tell me.
No, I can speak freely, in the sense that we have to understand why do people at the tops of organizations and institutions always look the same? So older white males. Why are there no women? Why are there no people of color? And this is part of the systemic. Injustice that we see. So we find terms and terminology for it. Terms like fit and feel. So when you go for an interview and somebody says, okay, that's great, but then you get the call back from HR or from the executive pastor or whoever may be saying, well, we don't know if you would be a good fit here. And we don't know how you would actually gel with some of the core values we have. So this is I just did a round of hiring for my company. And you look for somebody who models the ideals that you do. That is, excuse me, that is facts.
Common values.
Common values. But then there is like this another little layer to that where it's like, well, we also want people who look like us, who sound like us, who talk like us. This is the reason why, if you were not born in this country or you have a very unique name, like our East Indian community, I live in Brampton, so we have a large East Indian community. A lot of them go by preferred names, because if Amaldeep has a resume and Jason has a resume, and these two people have the exact same qualifications, who is going to be, especially now we're talking about cross-generational, who is somebody who is maybe 55 plus going to feel more comfortable speaking to on a regular basis? Amaldeep or Jason? Well, Jason looks like me, he sounds like me, I can picture him marrying my daughter. I can envision him. I understand him. So this is the idea of like, okay, that's like the idea of how we hire, how we process humans. We also have a issue in how do we train leaders. Right now, we all live in Ontario. We all live in the quote unquote GTA somewhat. I know you live a little bit further, Steve. But in the GTA, it's the largest dense population in all of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
In that population, in that region, we do not have a Bible college. So our Bible college is what I would say an hour and a half away in Peterborough, a rural. The people that go there is about 50 a year. All of them or most of them are from rural areas, not from urban areas, city centers. So we have a issue where multiculturalism is high. We're seeing a lot more people from around the world coming and represented in all different types of communities. And yet we are producing the same types of leaders. So now we have leaders who need to be sensitive, informed, and poised to lead a diverse group of people who have not yet encountered those type of issues.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at a church in Mississauga, and they have a diverse community, but the person that they want to hire, they don't have that person. The person that they're thinking and that they're envisioning, we should get, a woman, person of color, like that would be like the ideal. That person doesn't exist. Where are they going to find them? Where are you going to find them? Where the graduating class every year at Masters is, I think, 15, 20 every single year. They all kind of look the same. They all come from small towns, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to do a better job, because in a time where we are hearing 1,000 churches are closing every single year in Canada, and in a time where we're hearing that there are more opportunities than ever for people to rise up and to take over churches or to start churches and to reach communities, we need all different types of leaders to be able, ready, and willing to go into those communities and lead people.
Right. And I, Bart touched on it a bit. Like I was at Masters when the school was in Toronto, and it really opened up people to have to be a part of an urban center.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you came from far away, guess what? You're in the big city now, and you have to brush up against people who don't speak English or who speak broken English. And I think that was when the school, and again, not picking on Masters, but it's my experience, that's when the school had a lot more multiculturalism.
Everybody picked on Masters in that time, though.
Yeah, fair. Okay, so we're
Yes.
okay. We're okay.
Yeah.
We're in good company. But again, like
I went to Summit.
oh well, okay, well then. But and here's the thing: I was a part of Masters when it moved back to Peterborough, and the excitement level that people in rural areas had about the school moving out of Toronto and back to Peterborough was off the charts. But deep down, I think, for me, I knew right away, like this isn't necessarily a good thing for the church at large, because now we're training students outside of the city and we're going to try to send them into the city, and they're not going to be able to relate at all with, the young Black teenager who's going through stuff, or the young Chinese teenager who's going through stuff. Like, how do you relate when your only experience is really far away from the city? You don't experience any of the big city things that happen. Peterborough things close at like midnight, whereas in Toronto things are open,
midnight,
all
10 o'clock.
Pardon?
10 o'clock.
Yeah, dude. And 10 o'clock, depending on where you are. That's
Guys,
that's late.
I was being nice to the city of Peterborough. I was taking care of our Peterborough audience just in case.
I just want to also, speaking specifically to Steve's question, the percentage of educators, professors at Master, Stefan, you went there, I didn't. How many were white? How many were people of color?
They were all white.
And how many were male? How many were female?
About 95% male.
Okay, and leadership in the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada, if we want to start going specific, white or mixed, diverse?
It is all white. We had this conversation in my staff meeting yesterday that we just don't reflect what we're trying to do and sort of integrate, if that's the word I'm going to use, and our leadership doesn't reflect that on a national.
Yeah. That's not the right word.
This is why I usually let those guys talk first, because I just use whatever.
I heard something that you're the one with the hot takes.
I am the hot take artist.
That's facts.
I say everything. I regret nothing. I live with the consequences. But yeah, like I benefit. Benefit's the wrong word. I am one of those kids who grew up in church, and one of the things that actually propelled me into ministry, one was the call of God in my life, but two, I grew up with having Black pastors. I grew up with Andrew Jones, who's also on the house. He was my junior high pastor. I had Chris Chase, who was my youth pastor. And so these are guys who spoke into my life, and you look up to people like this and you say, oh man, here are Black guys in leadership in the church, and they're doing well. They're killing it. So for me, like, to see that, it was one of those things I was like, okay, they said, Chris was like, hey, go to Masters. I listened to him. And it sort of worked out okay for me now to this point. But who,
I'm going to get a call from Rich James, okay?
Right? So am I. He's going to be like, you guys are plugging everything but Masters.
But I look at our leadership now and our fellowship, and I say, well, who's speaking? Like, who do we have to look up to? Like, where is that?
That's really good, Stefan. That's really good.
Right? Like,
so
who do we like?
Do you mind if I ask a question though, in light of a lot of this though? Like, because part of the problem is, and this is where I would definitely say that you see problems, is there's a lot of tokenism, right? So people are just trying to, like, colleges and universities and business.
You're probably gonna have to repeat that because it cut out.
Okay.
Yeah.
My internet connection is unstable. So there's the fear of tokenism, right? Because you see in colleges, universities, workplaces, everyone's just like, we got people of color, we got women, and it sounds sketchy. And you're like, do you know what I'm saying? So how do we combat the tokenism versus, and I think you guys had a conversation about this in the house, about competency versus tokenism, which I know obviously that's a conversation that's going to be a lot longer than the remaining 15 minutes we have. But do you see that it's that tension, right? And I know that we would all agree there's, when we start to admit the awkward, it takes away a lot of the awkward. And then you can actually begin to converse and deal with what's in front of you. But 2 minutes before we move on, give me your quick thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think when you look at like tokenism and seeing exactly what Bart and Stefan said, like, it is all about what you represent. And what I mean by that is, I read a book. I read quite a few books. Let me just point that out there. It sounded like I read like a single book, but I was like, dang, it came out so bad. But
listen, as the hot take artist, you just got to live with it, O'Shea, and go for it.
but no, there was this book, and it talked about your character over your ability to do stuff. And I think when you're looking at that idea of tokenism, and we don't want to just hire a person of color or a female because we want to be able to say, hey, look, we have people of color and females. There's two ways to combat that, right? It's when you're hiring that person, I'm going to lean more towards hiring someone that has a stronger character than someone who is talented, because you can always coach someone who's not as talented. You can always get the workshops, get the training that they need. Character is a little bit harder to build up, right? And then when you look at the second one, if you don't want that idea of tokenism, and this sucks to say, but it starts with the mindset of an organization. The moment you think that, oh, I got to hire this person because we don't have enough people of color or females, you're already behind the game. It's got to be, I want to hire this person because they represent what we as a collective want to represent. And until that mindset kind of comes in, you're always going to have that perception of tokenism.
Mm-hmm. No, and I mean, that even applies to churches that are like, we want to attract young families. And then they go and hire like the old guy that he has a young family.
Again, I don't want to be like ragging on, our denomination, but why do they do that? A lot of the people, PAOC, even though it's all across Canada, and Canada's a large country, is very small. And if you have the right last name, you are favored to receive a position above somebody, even though they would say we want to prioritize young families,
right?
And somebody who has the right name in the right age bracket, who is a friend of a friend, also gets opportunities.
And that's true, because I get asked by people all the time, am I related to Bill Carruthers? I've never met the guy. I've never met the guy. I have no idea who he is. I've heard it, I don't know how many times since it's just so funny. But
I told my wife I was coming on this show today, and she's like, oh, like Dr. Bill Carruthers? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm like, no. Anyway.
It's funny Bart said that. I actually think that I remember in Bible college someone saying, hey, listen, the PAOC is like a family and it's closer than the mafia. So be careful who you talk to and be careful who you know. I was like, wow. Okay.
Bro, you work at a church, man. Why are you saying these things?
Hot take artist. One time.
No, it's true though. And I've heard that a lot. So just kind of moving on, let's go a little personal. Have you guys, I mean, again, based on time, have you guys experienced racism yourselves? Like an actual true moment?
Who wants to go first?
What was the question? Sorry, I got distracted real quick.
Have you experienced racism?
1,000%, easy.
Okay.
I can go for miles.
We don't have miles. We got moments.
Yeah, okay. I'll go really fast then. I was about 15 years old. I was with somebody else, and I was somebody else. I was not driving, and I got pulled out of the car. I've also been at the border and been profiled and been, had to strip search completely for no reason at all, crossing the border, and they took apart the car, took a knife to all the seats and the cushions to look for contraband or drugs or what have you. I've seen it in the sense, being tailgated by somebody in Canada, in Calgary. I'm from Edmonton. I was born in Edmonton, but I'm in Calgary. It's okay. I've gone over it. 2 years ago, I was in Edmonton, and I'm being tailgated by somebody who has a Confederate flag in their truck, their pickup truck. I'm like, this is, and I saw multiple. I'm not talking like one or two, but dozens of Confederate flags in northern or middle in Alberta. So when I say it's real, it happens all the time. And I'm sure these guys have experienced it just as much.
Yeah. I think just to tie off like Bart, I've had stories that can go pretty long too, and I think at least the part that was really awkward for me is when you look at me first, you don't necessarily see that I am. I'm just gonna say I'm gonna be hot take for the moment. I'm not as dark as you would expect a person of color to be, but yet I am literally half black. My dad is full out Jamaican, and like this has been, I guess, a struggle for myself, and even just sharing a story. There's been times where I've been in a car, same thing as Bart. I'm in the passenger seat. There's a time I'm driving with my wife coming home from church and got pulled over, and the driver didn't even approach my wife's side of the car. He came straight to my side of the car, told me to roll down the window, and said I need to search the car for drugs and firearms. And at this point, I'm asking why did you pull us over? And he couldn't give me an answer. It was, I am assuming that you have contraband on you, and I'm going to find that out, or I'm going to make you say you do so that I can get you out of this car. And it's an awkward moment where it's like, oh man, like this sucks. And then, yeah, there's just countless opportunities. And I do want to kind of put this out there. Through all of our stories, and I know a lot of myself, Bart, and Stefan, like, it's not coming out and saying that, because I know a lot of the stories are going to be about cops, and it's not every cop. I do want to really stress that point, because I know a lot of the stories do come out about it being cops and stuff like that. But
it's like the bad pastors. You hear about the bad pastors, you don't hear about the good ones. It's the same kind of thing.
Exactly.
I just really wanted to stress that, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I've had instances too. I think for me, I'm a public employee, and during the day, and a pastor. I'm not gonna finish this. Actually, I'm a public employee.
Say at night, bro.
Where's
it
it going?
The pastoral Batman? What's going on?
And so I actually
Stefan.
Yeah,
Swear to me.
So I face it on a regular basis. It's just from people,
Yeah.
It's sometimes out of their frustration that they're racist, but I think to myself, well, is it just out of frustration, or is there something more there? And I think, I could go on for miles, but yeah. I've experienced it too. It's not pleasant.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. Now, and this is one of those hot questions, right? So how much would you suggest is maybe confirmation bias in those moments where, like, because it's in your head that this happens, how often do you think that happens? Just in the same way that someone could be like, you know what, I could prophesy that tomorrow you're going to have a bad day, and I could do that all the time. Right? And because it happened the one time, I'm now right.
For me, I think, one, a lot of, I can tell, I'd say 90% of the time, just because of the words that are used.
Okay.
I've had someone actually tell me one time to go back to Jamaica and eat oxtail. And I was like, I was born literally down the street at the hospital in this country. Like, I'm not even Jamaican. Again, in my line of work, people get angry at things that are out of my control. And there are those people who are genuinely just angry at that. But a lot of the time, just based on what people say, it's okay, you're being genuinely racist here.
Yeah,
right?
no, 100%.
Yeah.
No, and I mean, I've seen it too. Again, growing up in Abbotsford, it's very heavily East Indian, and so
I've sorry for you living in Abbotsford. I'm sorry.
Me too. But Summit. So but again, high school was pretty brutal, right? Because I saw it kind of going both ways, right? I saw the East Indian guys being racist towards white guys being racist towards Indian guys.
Right.
And my dad,
like that for everybody in high school. I feel like even like when I was in high school, the comments that were made back and forth.
Absolutely, absolutely. And but like it's interesting though, because one group is racist and the other one, they're just bullies. And
Fair.
right, and there's so it's just that awkwardness, and you're like, how do we navigate that? So when anybody sees racism take place, whether it be a small thing or a moment, um, what are your guys' tips on how do we actually address it? Because again, we're called to address it, speak the truth in love, right, as Christians. So how do we speak the truth in love?
Well, I think the first thing we need to understand is it's not a black versus white thing or an East Indian versus black thing. It's everybody against racism. And what we want to do is be aware of it. I've been recommending a book to everybody, The Color of Compromise by Jamar Tishby. It's a really good book, and he uses an acronym at the end of it to sort of help people. ARC, awareness, reconcile, and commit. And be aware of what's happening. Reconcile the fact that, okay, this is happening and I need to do something. And then be committed to doing something consistently. And the first thing is just in the awareness is being willing and having the boldness, because we are Christians, having the boldness to stand up, step out and say, no, that is wrong. That isn't right. And especially if it's another Christian brother, regardless if it's a Christian brother or not, or sister, we're willing to pull them aside and say, hey, listen, you might think that that's a joke, but that could genuinely be offensive to that person. And so we want to be careful in our speech. And so I like what Jamar, what he says in the end of his book, using that acronym.
Okay.
I think even looking at like, we all know it. The best way to help combat something, the best way to fix an issue is not to point the finger. Nobody responds well to that. And that's just scientific. From the age of a child to an adult, if someone points a finger and says, you're doing something wrong, you're doing this wrong, no one's really going to care, because it just feels like attacking. I think the best way that we should do it is you can still address it without pointing the finger, but the difference is you're not standing from afar pointing a finger. You're actually walking towards, and not that they're a mess, but you're walking towards that mess. Mm-hmm. And you're walking towards that mess with the intent to walk with them past it as well. It's not just bringing up something. It's everybody walking with each other and encouraging us on. And the ultimate reality is we're human. So understanding that is understanding that we also need to have grace for people that we're walking with. Like that's the toughest thing to do, right? Is having a friend who may say some racial remarks and you're like, dude, you need to cut that out. Like, you need to stop. Let's not do that. And it's understanding that, yeah, that person said something that was inappropriate, but especially as Christians, and this is where I feel like it may suck to be in our positions, but that's ultimately what we're called to do, is not to just point the finger, not to just say, hey, you need to stop doing that. It's, hey, let's walk together. And hey, I know that this may be a habit. This may be something that has been ingrained in you. I'm willing to put my arm around you and I'm willing to walk with you and understand that, man, we're not perfect. And on your road to redemption, you are going to make mistakes. You are going to have some slip ups, but I got to be able to be there and show grace and show understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say the what O'Shea said is spot on, in the sense of, like, we started this whole thing off with Philippians, which is Christ being our example. And like what you just said, we go towards problems, and that's exactly what Jesus does, right? He goes towards problems. He goes towards where the issues are. And if we're talking about steps forward, I think the word that I think is the most prevalent is going to be proximity. You cannot hate somebody that you are close with. I think it's all of our jobs to understand each other at a higher degree. And the reason why that hatred can find a way between people is because you don't understand that person. So it's not just black towards whites or whites towards blacks. It's also other cultures, other races, other people groups. How do we find a way for us to walk together hand in hand? This is where not only do we have the biblical aspect to it, but the practical aspect to it. If you see something, you do need to say something. You do need to highlight something that is being misused or being propagated as injustice. This is where we have to look within ourselves as to what are our core values, what do I stand for, how am I going to live my life moving forward. So proximity, get closer to where the problem is and figure out what your position is going to be and how you're going to perpetuate actual change. So if there's a problem in education in your community, I think it's all of our responsibilities to then say, I'm going to try to be on the student council board, or not student, but the parent council board. And I'm going to try to be a council member. I'm going to try to find a way that I can now contribute to change the problem that I see. Because right now we're at the beginning stages of this problem where we're having conversations and we're having people that are asking questions of us. But now is the second part. We had the protests. We're having conversations. Now is the part where how do we actually get change to happen? Most of the time, we're going to have people who are accomplices or allies, depending on which term you want to use, that open the door and allow us to walk in and to speak, and allow us to come in to say, here's how we can actually work together. Because it cannot just be one side saying to the other side. It has to be a two-way conversation, and it has to be something that allows us to actually communicate together.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. There's like a million more questions that I keep coming up in my head that I'm like, I want to dig into, but obviously it's now time that you guys all gotta run.
We'll have to do this again very soon.
Yes, and I was just going to say, if you guys are good with that. Now, at the same time, would you guys be willing to, if someone had a question for you, because maybe there's something that you said, would you be willing to give your contact information? Yeah? Okay, yep. So
100%.
Choose whichever platform you want and just spell it out and say it and go for it. So I don't know.
It's Bart Aniston on Facebook or Instagram, and it's right here at the bottom where my name is. That's Bart Aniston.
Other way, dog.
Other way, right here.
Yeah,
that's my name right there.
There it is.
That's my name. So just that. And my light just turned off, so I'm done.
Yeah, I'm. My name is right there.
Other way. Again.
Oh, I feel. My name is right there. That's me on Facebook. On Instagram, just put a "the" in front of my first and last name. I'm the Stefan Watson, and then through those avenues, you can get my email address. But it's Stefan, the letter L, my last name @gmail.com. Also, you can hit me up on Twitter @StefanWatson23 because I got to represent for the Twitter life for the Twitter family out there.
Yeah, it's a big family.
Yeah. Well, I'm O'Shea McDonald. You can find, I'm not going to point because I'll probably make the same mistake, but it's down there. I use both hands.
Well played.
Well done, O'Shea.
But I also take pigeon mail because I'm not really on social media. I'm just, it's a joke. You can, I guess you can DM, you can message my wife. Like, it's really weird. She has like an account for both of us where she like captures my life. You can follow that. It's O'Shea Ning. And you can shoot questions there. She shows me it, so I will respond. But
some guys have the setup real nice, man.
Right?
Like a fan page.
She drives you everywhere and she runs your social media. She's an all-star, eh? Awesome. Right on. I really do appreciate you guys so much. And let me just pray for you before we depart. Jesus, thank you for these guys. Thank you for O'Shea, Bart, and Stefan. I pray that you would give them favor, that, Lord, you would guide them and lead them in their conversations today and in the future as they deal with much of this, and that, Lord, you would use them in profound ways, that, God, your kingdom would advance through them, and that, Lord, they would just continue to be models of integrity and character, and that, Jesus, you would, again, just be with them. So, Holy Spirit, fill them, empower them, and use them in incredible ways. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Steve, for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Steve. I
And
appreciate
everybody, please go check out the House of Commons show on YouTube.
I did this for Chris. I did this.
Shameless plug. House of Commons show.
Well
Go
done.
to YouTube and check it out.
Thanks. All right. See you guys.
Later, guys. Bye.
All right.
See you, everybody.